Stella and I sharing each other's joy is clearly a very base thing. Stella, you're dragging me to the base world. I think you
Well,
should
I'm saying
stop what you're trying to say.
Trump is the stoic German, and
I have seen
that's
I
a
have
good thing.
seen no I know I'm not gonna dig through the internet. I know I have seen Trump laugh before, but that's beside the point.
I don't think
Like
you have. You're
you're
just
conflating two different
falsely
things.
assuming that you've seen Trump laugh before. You might have had like a little like a tiny like slip or a giggle, but
I watched a lot of his public
Trump is
speeches
known to
over the
never
last few
laugh.
years.
Like the
It's
media
just not
even called
true.
him out. Like there's a whole book written on like there's something wrong with Trump because he never laughs.
But you're
Only that. I mean, I can, they will. I can question you. Let's say you have brain in the vat. Okay, how did you put the brain in the vat? What is the meaning of in? That means there is some space. Okay, brain putting the brain in the vat assumes you had time, you had space, you had a vat,
Yeah, so you get some kind
and
of
then
Hello and welcome back to Week in Review with the one and only Doovid. Apologies for the late start to the show. I tried to get my new headphones working, much to my chagrin. It was not to be. Well, not to be discouraged, we are moving forward with the show. And it's slightly later than our usual scheduled time due to my failure to account for daylight savings. Doovid, I'll hand it over to you for the introductions. Thank you for being here with us this evening for Week in Review.
Okay, great. So let me go straight into a screen share, and still using two computers now, like Jennifer. So just for the screen share at the beginning, and so actually found a few interesting things these weeks. So if you got it working. Okay, so I finally we crossed 100 members on my internet chess team. So here,
yeah, I saw that. Congratulations.
Yeah, so thanks to Doovid, the captain of the Israeli chess team on leechess.com. I guess there's multiple Israeli chess teams, but now we got 102 members. So props for that. Thanks everyone for joining. I was on Ralph's earlier. I guess the clip, God forbid, kind of like a dumpster fire. We analyzed some chess at the very beginning. So at the very beginning, we analyzed this chess game, and then it deteriorated.
Yeah,
rapidly.
there was a good 20 minutes before a solid 4.5 hours of dumpster fire, as I recall.
Yeah, I mean, he just got the same cast of characters who just keep on repeating themselves, and whatever. If that's what he likes to do, that's what he likes to do. So there's some good content, but most of it just kind of pointless yapping, unfortunately. So I had some interesting research I'm going to share about the figure 8. Let me show some other things here. So we had Rodney as a guest on Charles Moskowitz this week, talking about the Ukraine also. And I get, I like with Charles Moskowitz to kind of give an update on what's going on related to like events with Israel and Jewish politics. But like Charles really likes preaching. Like, so like half of the show is basically Charles, like, and he's pretty repetitive. So like I try to be careful. Like, I mean, the shows go on, and I mean, repeat myself a lot. It's the nature, but I try to do independent new research every week. So, it's like we get a new guest, and then it's just, repetition to hear what everybody thinks on all these various issues. So you have to think about the best way to use the technology. And like, talk radio is talk radio because people like talking. Usually people like Ralph, Luke, Charles, people are egotistical. They like the sound of their own voice. They like telling the same stories over and over again, which is probably what it takes to make it in streaming. You really have to like the sound of your own voice and be willing to tell the same stories and things over and over again, which isn't my style. So I felt, I mean, it was a decent program. It still got 100 views, but I had a lot of, new research or insights on what was happening in Ukraine, and we didn't really share it. We probably won't talk about that, week in review, maybe a tiny bit of meta-analysis, but I did want to mention, like, possibly, I mean, we'll get into it later, like the blue-eyed man and Putin. Like, everyone's like, it's Putin, is one man, the will of one man, as opposed to thinking like he's a puppet of other people, or that, Putin is kind of like a representative of a multicultural organization. So do people lend Putin more credibility than he deserves because he's a blue-eyed man? It's like, oh, he's the dictator, he controls the will of everything that's going on, as opposed to saying like, well, he's just kind of a figurehead, a puppet for a larger movement. And so, is it related to that kind of, assumption, like, oh, it's a multi-ethnic empire, but Putin has blue eyes, so he must be the single-handed person, dictating every single thing that happens. So just something to think about. But they've clamped down on the censorship on the Ukraine issue. God forbid, it's getting pretty bad. So we probably won't talk about it that much. Even the chess servers, like banning Russian or pro-Russian sentiment. And so here was University of Michigan Saturday morning physics program on the James Webb. So I shared the James Webb thing, from when it started, and I don't think it's quite in position. So it's still going to take another like month and a half or 2 months till it's gets up and working. But the U of M physics had a update on the current state. Here was University of California TV on time, Einstein, and the coolest stuff about the universe, kind of introductory metaphysics about time and Einstein's theories. Jennifer shared this with me. I watched it. It was pretty good. Ben Watkins had another program talking, not sure if they're theist, but, going over some of the arguments of minds and physicalism. And Ben Watkins has a pretty systematic understanding of this. So it's relatively good programming. So yeah, I was taking this course. I'm always listening to these courses from the teaching company. I have a subscription. My dad used to buy the actual courses, but now I have a subscription. And this course came out like 2 months ago, but I finally got to watching it on why insects matter. And insect is a pretty important part of biology and ecology. So, I've studied insects before, and there were a few things I thought were interesting for Week in Review, specifically the figure eight. So I'd seen this before, although I hadn't thought the figure eight. And so bees have what's called the waggle dance. And it was actually tested. It was very difficult. Like, people knew about the waggle dance going back for a long time. And it took some experimentation just decades ago where they figure out exactly how it works and what it does. And it basically informs the other bees of a location of food or for a next dwelling. And so what the bee does is it waggles its tail, kind of like twerking, God forbid, but it waggles its tail walking in a straight line while waggling. And then it makes a figure eight. It circles back around one direction, then it waggles, and then it circles back the other direction, making a figure eight. Although they figured out the communication purpose method of the waggle dance is distance and direction. So what the straight line that the bee walks in is with the angle of the sun to the food source, and then like the distance of the line has you hear it has like or how much time it takes is indicative of distance, and bees could actually go quite a distance, like even a few miles to for pollination for food. So this figure eight dance method is a way of communicating the distance and direction for the other bees to locate the food. And so I thought that was might be interesting to Jennifer, just the the figure eight. And also the bees have another so here you can see like a bunch of bees around, and you have the waggle dance. This is just on Wikipedia, where it does the figure eight, like it waggles, then it circles around one direction, and then it waggles and it circles around the other direction, being a basic figure eight. And you can see the other bees around. That it's possible through electric sensors, because it's dark, how exactly the bees interpret or transfer that information is still unclear, but that's able to direct the other bees to the food. And related to resonance theory, like Grossberg and the resonant mind, they also do the waggle dance for the bee scouts that tell the bees about the location of a new hive, because I guess bees grow and they change locations maybe once a season or multiple times a season, depending on the variety. And so they'll send out multiple scouts that will scout multiple locations, and then the scout will do a waggle dance, showing the angle and the distance to the new location for the other bees to take a look, and like a resonance. So I guess one bee does the waggle dance, although there's multiple scouts. So within the hive, there might be multiple scouts doing the waggle dance, pointing to different locations. And so the other bees will follow the directions and go to look at the location. And then what will happen is that multiple bees will start doing the waggle dance to the new location. And so it'll be like a winning out match of various bees. And then sometimes the bees will actually fight, two different bees doing a waggle dance in different directions. But eventually there'll be like, maybe 5-10 bees doing the waggle dance in that direction. And from that dance, that will win out as the direction of the new hive. So I found that pretty interesting, and I thought, for Week in Review, I'd share that specifically related to the figure eight. So here you can see another graphic of this waggle dance figure eight, and where there's two different co-aligning factors of the angle that tells the direction, and then the distance, and maybe how quickly they rotate. That will give how quickly they waggle. That will tell the direction and the distance. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Here's another scientific paper. So if anyone's heard of the waggle dance, it's a pretty known thing. It's been around. Like bees are pretty popular. People study bees. It's an interesting phenomenon. It's the figure eight. And added on the figure eight is just how wings fly compared to regular birds. Most insects, their wings are not strong enough to fly in the flopping manner of birds, and they need to get extra drag through this figure eight rotation of the wing, and through as opposed to just like regular wings flapping on a bird, that through this figure eight configuration of the direction of moving the wings, they're able to increase the drag, and therefore insects with lighter wings are able to fly relatively with a less wing to body ratio than birds, and it's through the figure eight. So I'm not sure if you had any quick comment on that, and I'll finish the rest of what I was talking about. We could talk about that more if that's interesting to you.
Yeah, just to give, definitely interesting, and just to give a little bit of context. Sorry for my whizzing. computer. The potatoes got a rebel streak today. I've got it up on the screen right now. Why the figure eight is important, and we'll get into that more later with these counting systems and divisors versus division a bit later on. I think I sent you this diagram, so for the audience probably not sure what we're talking about, this is bottom left there.
Okay, so we'll talk about that more and continue, but I thought that, through the figure eight, that the bees are capable of indicating direction and distance, and then also just related to pure wing aerodynamics of drag, that insects were, at least according to popular science, evolve a method of flying with a relatively light wing to body mass ratio compared to birds who don't use the figure eight method. I was on Jai Devi's stream a few times. I was on one stream, we were talking about Ukraine, and so I mentioned, historically in like the geopolitics allyship, that India was allied with Russia, and the US and NATO were allied with Pakistan. Like, God forbid there were wars between India and Pakistan, and the US and NATO allied with Pakistan, and India allied with Russia. So just Jennifer was sharing like some Arnab Goswami, and just to understand the geopolitics of India, was neutral in the UN vote, and possible Russia-philic, and it's because historically in previous wars with Pakistan, and even till today, that the U.S., NATO, Europe allyship has been with Pakistan, and Russia, bucked that by backing India, and even like arms and weapons dealing. Another stream with Jai Dev. Very proud of her. She gave a whole 2-hour in Hindi and Urdu. I guess she's Pakistani, so Urdu and Hindi are very similar, even more similar than like Ukrainian and Russian. It probably there's more similarity between Urdu and Hindi, and so she went over Bhagavad Gita basic teachings in some comparison to the Bible, taking a more pro-Vedic approach, claiming that the Vedic wisdom predates the biblical wisdom. So this was a pro-Vedic channel, even mostly in Hindi, and then we talked. Most of the people were talking in Hindi, although there's a little bit of English, mostly for my sake. So I'll probably keep on working with Jai Dev. Actually, I'm friends with her now on Facebook. I'm trying to hook her up with a guest, ISKCON, official ISKCON devotee, to talk about Krishna consciousness. They're noting towards the stream she had the Krishna background, so Doooovid was superimposed with Krishna and had the crown of Krishna. So great privilege to be superimposed with Krishna, and so people were commenting on that. This man here, Abhibhajya, USA Indic Darshan, has also a channel. I think it has over 1,000 subs, and we might stream. And I was saying we should talk about Hinduism as a universal religion, or Indian group strategy. Are the lessons of Hinduism universal, and also like the unification theory of everything, applying Vedic science? So I'm not sure if that will happen this week, but so I've mentioned this a few times. Vivekananda, who came to Detroit in the 1890s after the 1893 World Parliament of Religion, where my grandfather's grandfather was a rabbi who participated and spoke. Now most famous for Vivekananda, but a lot of religious leaders of the day. And then Vivekananda spent multiple years traveling around America, including to Detroit, Temple Bethel, where I was bar mitzvahed, a different location, later moved into the suburbs. And so I was mentioning that Vivekananda's lecture at Temple Bethel was India's message to the West. So I was thinking the relation. Then later he used the expression unity and diversity, that Vivekananda either coined or definitely popularized the expression unity and diversity, which now is a very popular expression across the board. And I believe the first time Vivekananda actually used that was in Detroit at this speech in Temple Bethel. And it was actually a protest, and the papers were saying he's a heathen and they shouldn't let him speak, and so on and so on. But so hopefully I'll continue working with Jai Dev, and maybe Abhi, if he has me on his channel, we'll talk about like, is Hinduism a universal religion or just an Indian group strategy? And if it is universal, so to say, what is the message of India to the West? Here's a recent Pew survey about people quitting their jobs. Okay, it's too big to link. It's not that important. You could just check Pew. So pays too low, no opportunities for advancement, feel disrespected at work. Over half of the people felt that. Then the childcare, flexibility of when to put hours, but this general feeling trapped, pays too low, there's no way to advance, and I'm being disrespected. And actually, of the people who quit, the majority were able to find something else where they're earning more money and more opportunity for advancement. So it's a bad sign in America of the labor market. So Ashish Dalala was on Theology Unleashed with Arjun also. Interesting talk. So I'm not sure if Ashish will step into the debating realm and start debating atheists, but I had him on my channel. Definitely like his scholarship and his literature. We'll see how well he performs on the debate circuits. Possibly he might not actually end up performing that well, even though he is a scholar. It's different, but happy to see him
Probably
try.
depends on the nature of the debates that he takes part in, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, he actually mentioned like Matthew Dillahany or something like that, and it might be interesting. I don't know how well he'd do with T jump. Maybe he'd do okay. I don't know.
Oh, it depends what you mean by a success. I mean, as you said last time, for some people, there may not be any way to succeed with T jump, just the value proposition not being there.
Yeah, so we'll see about that. But I'm happy to see him keep on advancing his research and his scholarship. Whether he, maybe more friendly, like Ben Watkins type conversations would do him better than debates. I was on Zobita again, and so she has stopped doing like these long streams like Ralph that kind of just degenerate into name calling and people repeating each other, and has now been making shorter videos advancing Islamic causes, or like she likes pointing out hypocrisy. So I mentioned on the stream, like, what do you get from correctly pointing out hypocrisy? So even if you let's say you're right and you demonstrated that there's hypocrisy, to some extent, like, well, okay, you demonstrated that a person's a hypocrite. Now what does it mean? What significance is there, so to say, if you correctly demonstrate someone's a hypocrite? So but interesting talk. And so maybe I'll keep on working with Zobita also, but that's much more confrontational. And she also likes to talk about very confrontational issues like war and racism. So but if she does want to do that, I'll probably continue working together with her. So I mentioned a few weeks ago Alice in Chains' Dirt, and I don't know if I'm gonna, maybe I'll sing a tiny bit, but I think this album I listened to hundreds of times, and it was kind of like a concept album. I mentioned Frank Zappa and Freak Out. Some people say it was the first major concept album where there's really a theme to the music, and the whole album kind of advances this theme. And also what I was talking about, the change in music to representative of dissonance, like I was saying the hero's journey, and saying religious music, certainly Western Christian music, somewhat in Vedic music. It has the basic hero's journey pattern, and in um generally in like Krishna always wins. So the basic hero's journey in most religious music is triumphant, especially in like Hare Krishna tunes, where there's theme, variation, and resolution, and the variation is usually through the introduction of dissonance, and the dissonance is what's resolved. And so Judeo music is usually in minor and has similar theme, variation, and resolution, although musically most Jewish music remains in minor. And so some people say Jewish music is more depressing, or because we're a minority, and so Jews, it's hard to be triumphant. But it has the same basic pattern. But as I said, the Jewish music will have this mirror structure of the four part of God's name, 1, 2, 3, 2, and it's not like triumphant in the same way like the hero's journey, and could be because we remain in the material realm. So the high part goes back down to the second part, because even though we might achieve the high part, like our soul, we have a moment of realization, but then we're brought back down into the reality of the material realm. And so I sang like that Offspring song, and Radiohead, like the Creep, we'll call it Creep, the anthem for incels, and the Loser's Journey, where it has the same, musically, all music basically has theme, variation, resolution, but in a different way. So Alice in Chains, Dirt, is kind of the anti-hero music. It's structured that way. It's very musical. So the lead singer has a wide range. The first album, they had that one song, "Man in the Box." Do you know the Alice in Chains sound familiar to you at all?
I've heard it. I'm not even sure I would recognize one of their songs, though.
Their first album, they had one popular song, like "I am the man in the box, buried in my," and there's some cursing in it. And then it's like the high part, which is kind of heretical, and it's pretty negative. It's like uh uh he sings like Jesus Christ, deny your maker's son, rake my eyes, can you show them shut? So it's pretty negative music, where it's existential angst of the pain and suffering of the reality of the world is so much that he's kind of glorifying death. And he eventually dies. The lead singer, Cantrell, eventually dies of an overdose. But the theme of most of the music is drug use and unsolvable problems and the glorification of death. So Dirt, the most famous song, "The Rooster," which also has the same basic theme all the way through, which is just the pain and suffering of the reality of the world, and the glorification of death as some sort of escape of the suffering, the inevitable suffering of the world. Even like Nirvana, taking the Buddhist term, and the word nirvana, which has that Buddhist meaning of the escaping of suffering, like through death. So a lot of the alternative grunge music has these pretty negative look and views, where nothing good's coming to us, and we got to use drugs for the pain. So even the positivistic music, like Offspring, which is kind of like a grungy love song, which is about having to share the girl, like God forbid, like the best you could do in the 90s is God forbid, have relations with a promiscuous woman, because like the current state of degeneracy. So you don't have like a Beatles love song where the typical song, boy meets girl, falls in love, lands the girl. So like the 90s already, like Offspring is your love song, or Creep is your love song, where there's just like complete incel and can't even talk to her or have any hope of a normal relationship. And so Alice in Chains also has this very negative take in one song after the other. So Rooster has kind of like a basic anti-war message. There's a lot of lyrics in and of itself as its own song. Walking tall, machine gun man, they spit on me in my homeland. A lot of time, like recognition that we're not really a hero. Like even if you went and fought for your country, you come home, and you're not liked, you're not loved, and somewhat also like a glorification of death, and also about drug use. So there's one song called Junkhead, and God forbid, it's like he has the chorus is like a conversation with his drug dealer. Like there's a lot of yelling. It opens like, yeah, yeah, and he hits kind of like these minor, different religious tonal music, and it's like these lyrics, like in the so the chorus like, "What's your drug of choice? Well, what have you got?" Like it's him and his dealer having a conversation back and forth, and his line. I used to say this when I went to the my dealers, God forbid, like I don't go broke, and I do it a lot. Um, but that didn't even really make the radio. But there's song that made the radio, and I was thinking of that. I listened to that over and over again. I think I was in maybe even junior high school when it came out, and high school, and then later, even New York after I became religious and I was driving a lot. I ended up getting a copy of Dirt, and I listened to it over and over again. Um, and it's probably representative of the existential angst, and God forbid, the kind of giving up spirit that there's really nothing good that's out there, and the glorification of death. So pretty negative, although it really was good music. And think, why was it good music? Why did I like that music? Was it representative of how I felt? And it probably was, and it still is today, because he's probably getting at issues that are real, that like the decline of society, and um, real issues that when things hit, where there's really not opportunity, the nature of the American dream, what it means, like boy meets girl and builds up a family, finds a job, uh, has changed, demographic change, the nature of America's role in the world, not being looked at as good guys. Uh, so I guess with that, we'll start with the week in review, and little, not really a chant, but kind of a music review, and to understand the parallel of the hero's journey that has the anti-hero journey. So musically, Alice in Chains is some of the greatest stuff out of the '90s. I would put Dirt as one of the greatest albums ever made. Almost all the songs are good. It's a thematic album where it almost all is on the same theme. It has multiple hit songs that are still played on the radio today. Um, and it's the journey of the anti-hero, where the hero loses at the end. The hero is the person who sees the problems with society, and the Joseph Campbell, where you're supposed to go out of society and get some sort of special wisdom, and then be able to come back and change society, where basically the hero gives up and just dies. And that actually mirrors the story of the lead singer of Alice in Chains, who ended up dying of an overdose of drugs already back in maybe the 2000s. So with that, welcome to Week in Review.
Yeah, wow. What a week. I am trying to set this up so that I can the audience just let me know, like, how bad is the background noise, if any? Because I'm a little bit, mixed up between all my notes and everything. All right.
I didn't notice any background noise. I saw that. I don't know if Josh Neal and Jefferson Lee is making a comeback, but I did like their music review programs, and I think I'm not sure if they did Alice in Chains, but I don't think they came on to the hero's journey or anti-hero's journey interpretation of the music.
Yeah, I have no clue. That's not really my thing. Anyway. I'm not sure where to start for my talk, because Doowovid mentioned the figure eight. So, sort of short little intro with this diagram that's probably this cool thing. Let's see if I can just. All right. Was it this diagram that made you think of the bee thing, Doowovid?
No, I was taking the course anyways. Like I listened to, I'm a member of the great course, so I listened to all of them as they come out. And he was just going over the waggle dance, and he pointed out that it was a figure eight. So I looked into it. So I mean, it was randomly. I listened to all the new courses as they come out. So it wasn't like I was specifically like going to be studying insects, but that was one of their new courses. And the insects are pretty interesting and important. And it just caught my ear when he mentioned the waggle dance is a figure eight. And then the figure eight came up again that I mentioned with the flight pattern of the insect wings. So I mean, you're always mentioning the figure eight. So it just putting other information together that I thought would be interesting for week in review. Well, there's also one other random thing I couldn't find. I have to look up if it's interesting. I could look up and find there's one type of ant where they have like their antenna with the eye at the end, and for the mating practice dance, they literally measure who has the biggest eyes, the longest eye antennas, and then they go through like a dance, but really the dance is for the purpose of who has the longest eye sockets, uh, and then whoever has the longest eye socket wins, and the other males leave, and then that man wins the mating game. And so there's a whole bunch of interesting things in the insect, but I just thought for week in review that the figure eight thing was pretty relevant because you're always going over that, and it's an interesting way of thinking about the bees and how they would be able to communicate information to each other, that they would use some sort of dance, but at the center of the dance is a figure eight that is able to convey angle and distance.
Are you suggesting the figure eight is some sort of high information density compression device?
I'm not suggesting anything. I was just listening to this course, and I learned that this week, so I shared it. I mean, you could make some sort of conjecture if it's like Occam's razor, like if because the ant uses a figure eight, that it's some sort of like means that it's the most through evolutionary processes or God's will, that it's the best way of conveying this information, or if it's just random, and that in reality there could be multiple methods to convey information, and they just happen to use a figure eight. So I didn't make any conclusion. I just learned that this week and thought I'd share it. I mean, you could make a conclusion. You're, I guess, more an expert on the figure eight than I am.
Well, being expert on a number, that's something. Unless, of course, no numbers higher than 4/5 exist, which appears to be something my model may be hinting at in terms of a coherent. Anyway, I don't know what the word is, so we'll just go to the other topic, which was the Kurt Jaimungal show, which I have actually been working on diligently. And I have pretty much like probably 2 hours of material, not fully ready, but given how complicated these ideas are, I think it'll take at least 2 hours to get through them. So I'm basically going to, maybe I should just get through these ones first. But anyway, I do have plans for the Kurt Jaimungal thing. I'm really excited to talk about. Let me get through these ones first.
Do you have a date?
No. We haven't set a date. No. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's serious and everything, and that, he's thinking about it, but a little trepidatious to set a date. I have to get something good ready. I'm too much in the mode of defensiveness. I need to be in the mode of just sharing shiny, happy peopleness, if you will. I noticed something interesting. You ever heard of something called a stellation?
Not sure.
Well, anyway, I guess it's a line between corners, but I figured why not look up what was special about the number 59, because 118 divided by 2 is 59, and there's technically 59 balls in the QMPT. And I noticed this. A regular icosahedron, which is a 20-sided polygon, has 59 installations. Guess how many amino acids there are. Who wants to guess whether that's a coincidence or not? All right. What else? Arnab Goswami. I think I sent you that link. Did you like that coverage? Because I thought it was pretty good and entertaining in ways that I hadn't seen in a while.
I didn't have time to watch it. I mean, I didn't learn that much. Like, you don't learn that much from the news. So you're generally just like news coverage. It's all repetitive, and it's more commentary and interpretation. So you can only watch so much of it.
Yeah. A couple times a year ought to do it. Someone suggested I debate someone called Inspiring Philosophy on the existence of God. That sounds like a good one. And I think that could be friendly because historically, at least, there have been arguments on both sides. A little more nuanced.
Without talking about Ukraine, you see the purpose, like the value of multiple truth hypothesis, because you have important news stories and you have like a narrative side, and the purpose of the narrative to some extent is to help clarify who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. And there's, so to say, multiple truths or perspectives that, depending on how you frame it, put one side is the good guy and the other is the bad guy. For example, the Oliver Stone recent thing on rising up Ukraine basically puts the information to paint the Russians as the good guys and Ukraine as the bad guys. And here in the West, generally America, YouTube, that's already like censorable to take a positive light on Russia. And so for the news coverage, you can see you really need multiple truth hypothesis to to understand the different perspectives and the different angles, as opposed to one dimensional that one side's good and the other side is bad. And if you just like Russia is just a madman who are deranged and trying to do pejorative things for base reasons that are logical but immoral, or something like that, as opposed to some sort of larger context where there's reasons on both sides, there's complaints on both sides, and you need really a multiple truth hypothesis to understand what's going on. And then also all the various nations and players and interests. So Arnab Goswami, you get a different perspective. It's in India, so you have a more neutral, even pro-Russian perspective that you wouldn't get in Western media. That's almost all one-sided. But if you really want to understand the issue, or you'll be a substantial person, you need something like the multiple truth hypothesis to really get your head around, for the mind to grasp the complexity of an issue.
I think they were remaining neutral and just taking their own side due to having enemies on both sides of their northern border.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess India's like relatively staying neutral on this, and so Arnab Goswami is representative of that, as opposed to most Western media that's pretty one-sided in favor of Ukraine. And at this point, Russian TV has actually been censored. So I was watching Russian TV, just to hear their perspective, and that's even been censored, kicked off of YouTube now. But I think multiple truth hypothesis is very useful. But even for something like Ukraine, Russia, which is almost too controversial even to talk about, but just understand like multiple truth, how multiple.
Yeah, so let's not belabor this with like repeating it 3 times. It's like, okay.
Yeah,
well, we, well, about it. We shouldn't be talking about it, or what? Like
an advertisement for multiple truth hypothesis.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's hard to make a make a point that way. To laugh or not to laugh, that went on for quite a time. I couldn't believe how much time you were willing to devote to that. And I checked in my textbook, and there is no counterindication for laughing.
Were you going to read from your Ayurvedic textbook this week?
Yeah, I was checking out a bunch of stuff like the cosmological principles and stuff. That's how I was going to try to do my strategic counterproof of the possibility of a single unified field model. My version of the Godel thing, I suppose. Now let's see if I have it on here. All right. No, I don't. But there is a big list of urges that shouldn't be suppressed.
If you're mentioning 59, I just finished that book on Erdos, the man who loved only numbers. I guess he was born in Hungary, and traveled and ended up in Israel. He wrote like 800 papers on math. And they say there's close to 200,000 papers published every year in mathematics and proofs. But this guy, Erdos, one of the things is every time he heard a number, he would tell you unique things about the number, many times related to factorization or prime numbers. And some things are related to a unique feature of a number, and then questioning how many times that unique feature appears, if it only appears in that number, or if it appears in more numbers, and then if it appears in infinite. And so you have a lot of hypotheses about number theory, but and he came up with constant ones. And every time you told like randomly, the book, The Man Who Loved Only Numbers, but he always thought about numbers. And every time you heard a number, would tell you unique features of that specific number.
Okay, like a Rain Man type of special giftedness type thing.
Well, I mean, Rain Man was more just a savant. I'm not sure. He wasn't like. I mean, Erdos actually published 800 papers. So I mean, he got an education and understood. Rain Man's just a savant who could do like certain calculations in his head or memory. He didn't publish any papers or come up with his own theories. But yeah, in a certain sense, and I guess it was kind of weird. It said he had some sort of sexual disorder, so he had no interest in women, and he was definitely an eccentric of a high order. But I mean, he was still able to, I think, get a PhD and won many prizes and collaborate with people to write papers despite his extreme eccentricity.
I don't know that not being interested in women qualifies one as an eccentric per se, but okay.
Well, no, I mean, besides that, he was extremely eccentric. Besides his lack of interest in women, just in all his behavior. But I just mentioned it because you mentioned like 59, and that was one of the things. Like everywhere he went, he would see numbers, and then he would come up with theorems, usually based on the factorization of numbers and unique elements of the factorizations of numbers. And then he would actually derive theories, questioning whether that occurs in other numbers, and then an actual publish a paper and theorem of why this occurs in so many numbers or infinite. So if a certain, like, if the factorization of two different numbers adds up to the same, or just different ways of how you factor a number and prime numbers or multiply them in some sort of unique phenomenon, and then a conjecture that would be that this occurs with an infinite amount, this pattern that would occur an infinite amount of times, and then trying to prove it. So he had hundreds of theorems like that.
Nice, thanks for sharing. So I noticed on my list that laughter wasn't there, so it occurs to me that maybe, can you see the list, by the way? It's got past gas, urinate, and all that. It doesn't have laughter on here. So I'm thinking maybe the urge to laugh could be something that is exacerbated by a suppression of these urges. Because, like, I do think there's several categories of laughter, and some are more pernicious than others. I would be into going into that. That would be interesting.
It could be of a different nature, where it's saying laughter is a physical reaction to something cognitive, and all of these are physical reactions to something physical.
Well, what?
Laughter is in reaction to something mental, as opposed to all of those mainstream bodily reactions are reactions to something physical. Laughter is a product of mind, as opposed to it's a physical reaction, but it's a product, a result of mind, as opposed to all of those are, um, I would say, not a result of mind, but they're a result of something physical.
I think that you're stretching it to say that tears are a result of something physical necessarily. I mean, people cry
Well,
over
they
all
are.
sorts of things.
We're saying tears are a essential purpose. I mean, you have a duct and a whole gland specifically for the purpose of producing tears, and it serves the basic function of putting water in liquid, or cleaning the eye. So you could it's something like sadness could produce tears, but the production of tears is a natural reaction that could be elicited by an emotional response, as opposed to laughter. Uh, at least mainstream has no known physical purpose. Like I said, like a burp, a yawn, all of those have an objective mainstream physical purpose that has no connection to cognitive reaction, although cognitive reaction could cause it, or you could cognitively suppress it, as opposed to laughter has a purely cognitive function.
Where would you place a hiccup in that?
A hiccup is
Things.
I mean, it's something purely physical where you just have but I mean, hiccups are caused by some sort of breathing anomaly that that, as opposed to laughter, is triggered by something mental.
So tears, that's something physical. Hiccups, that's caused by something mental, though. What's
No,
the mental thing that causes
everything
hiccups
besides
exactly?
laughter is caused by something physical. Laughter is the only one that's not caused by something physical. And I was mentioning Ralph, and like no one really studied it. It's kind of, I mean, that's why it's low tier, just argumentative, because like people haven't really thought or studied about it, and then they're arguing and name calling, and I guess because the science, if you're saying that laughter is representative of degenerate behavior, and most people think that comedy is a good thing, so it seems like I'm attacking them, which maybe I am, but I'm expressing a school of thought or study or research, um, but laughter is involuntary, and many studies, or if you think about it, that there is no such thing as voluntary laughter. That voluntary laughter is an involuntary reaction to mental stimulus, and possibly something like being tickled, but then the phenomenon, like you don't laugh when you tickle yourself, so it's some sort of mental stimulus that the same, like if rubbing your own, like that, being ticklish, it only happens when someone else does it to you, that the stimulus in and of itself doesn't cause the laughter.
So what's the protocols on tickling? You allowed to laugh then?
Well, it's saying it's involuntary, that if you're ticklish, you laugh involuntarily, so it's not it's something, um but it's something cognitive of thought or the mind that causes it to happen, not something physical. And so that it's not just touching your body in a certain part, it happens when someone else does it. And the exact, even tickling is unclear why that causes laughter. By saying a hiccup has a basic physical function of restoring homeostasis to a breathing pattern, or expelling air, or like a yawn. That it's also a little bit questionable, like what causes a hiccup or a yawn. But
I believe it is an interruption of the digestive process that sends basically is your body trying to get you to sit down.
Yeah, I mean, it has something to do with digestion or breathing, both a hiccup and a yawn, as opposed to laughter, which
I think a
doesn't.
yawn is less controversial. That's almost universally accepted as being to increase oxygenation, blood oxygenation.
Yeah, so it's unclear. There is effective laughter, but the likeliness that laughter is caused by that, and then all the evidence is that laughter is caused by the mind. It's not caused by something physical. It's not caused by lack of homeostasis, and then you have a hiccup or a yawn to restore a proper homeostasis. Laughter is caused by a reaction of the mind, and that's why it's unique in that manner. And it's
That's the
involuntary.
whole tickling thing.
So, I mean, tickling is the exception because usually you laughed as a result of a stimulus, of a mental stimulus, of a sense perception, of a cognitive function like seeing or hearing something. So, laughter, being ticklish, is by being touched. So, tickling is kind of the exception to laughter. But it said that you don't laugh when you tickle yourself. It's only funny when someone else tickles you, and it's not like a pure stimulus. That there's something caused in the mind of someone else doing it to you. That if you did it to yourself or used, some sort of tool to do it, it wouldn't cause laughter. It's only caused laughter when someone else actively does it to you.
Yeah, it's a bit of a technicality there. I don't know if I want to get into that. I liked when I think it was you that said that anger was a physical reaction to a mental phenomenon. I have this on my list of quotes. I'm pretty sure this was you. And
Well, laughter is a physical reaction to a mental phenomenon. You say anger also is it's unclear. I mean, there is physical changes in anger. So most emotions are a physical reaction to a mental phenomenon. That's the nature of emotions. So if you put laughter is like emotive, so that list that you had up are not like emotive. So laughter is not necessarily an emotion or emotional, but like emotion, it's a physical reaction to a cognitive process, and it's because that it's largely unknown because it's dependent on the hard problem of consciousness. So there's theories of laughter. Laughter is not well understood, as opposed to like a yawn, a hiccup, a cough, are reasonably well understood. Even though you could that you could elicit those, you could even voluntarily produce it. You could voluntarily produce some of the elements of laughter, but basically there's no way to force yourself to laugh. So if it's just like Jennifer, laugh. You can't. That there's no way to make yourself laugh. You might be able to think of a joke, and then if
unless
you're
all
putting,
your laughs are fake, huzzah!
well, I'm saying that laughter can't be fake because it's involuntary. So you could laugh along with people, and they might hopefully,
Good one.
like maybe they wouldn't. But laughing's an involuntary response.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
That's why tickling only is funny when someone else does it to you, and you don't laugh when you do it to yourself, even if it's the exact same stimulus.
Have you ever tried?
Yeah, I think I was ticklish when I was a kid, like maybe like an uncle.
Because I have
can't
tried
remember.
to tickle myself, and I did giggle. I mean, that could be me.
Well, I mean, by yourself, like no, I mean, so if and I think usually being ticklish only is when you're a kid and it wears off. But no, I think if you were like by yourself and tickled your foot, you wouldn't laugh. Maybe if like someone else was tickling you and they're still in the room in front of you, and you tried tickling yourself, that but whatever stimulates that. But it's saying it's some sort of cognitive function, social function that it's involuntary because it only works when someone else does it to you, not when you do it to yourself.
Okay. I like the fact that you're drawing attention to this cause. My issue is it sort of seems to fall apart because you either have to take the position that Leela has nothing to do with laughter, or that Leela is somehow non-valid. Now, neither of those seem tenable. So, what about a multiple truth hypothesis on laughter? You
mean Leela like pastime?
it's a little more than pastime. It's well, I mean, what are the ones? You're the one who's loves the what are they called? Hare Krishna so much. Haven't you memorized his trolling when he was a youngster with the theft of the butter and whatnot? Dust
Well, I use that
memory
Leela translated as pastime, but I mean, just looking on Google, Leela means Sanskrit for play, sport, spontaneity, or drama. Um, and so I didn't connect Leela to laughter. That I mean, it's saying as a pastime. All of Krishna's pastimes are Leelas. So maybe as a child, and I don't necessarily like if trickery or playfulness is connected to humor, or what difference that makes. That even if you had pastimes that were Leelas that involved humor, what difference would that make?
Well, it's sort of disproving the whole humor equals bad thing as a
No,
categorical imperative.
no, because well, I mean, one thing you could actually use an
Nothing the
argument to
divine
bolster it.
does is bad.
Well, all of those are in Krishna's youth, so it's a Leela because even that Krishna was acting like a normal child. But it was saying like no, in Krishna's adulthood, he doesn't do that anymore. Although there may be some Leelas like romantic Leelas with Radha, but like no, that's only a unique attribute of Krishna's youth, and it's only interesting because here Krishna is acting like a normal child, even though Krishna is no normal child, and that's why I was talking about in the stream where Stellar's like you must not be around kids much, and I was like no, like I'm around kids relatively like occasionally like I don't have my own children, but like like I teach, I have family, and that kids laugh is natural because kids have lower cognitive function. So the fact that Krishna's playful leelas only occur in his youth is almost more support than contradiction.
In terms of like the principle, I wouldn't say I'm opposed, but the implementation, does actively denying something actually diminish its probability of manifestation? No.
I'm not saying I've solved laughter. I'm giving mainstream interpretations of laughter from the Talmud, from Aristotle, from science. Even the majority of scientific theories see laughter as a form of catharsis. And my own personal take that I look at laughter as a sign of bad character. I'm not like publishing a theory. I don't have a theory on laughter. People don't realize that I'm saying over the mainstream research. So that people have enjoyed laughter. Laughter is a large part of their life, or they see it as a positive thing. Um, that's up to them to understand laughter. But there's actually so to say, the mainstream opinion. I'm not giving my own ideas here. Like I said, like I'm just telling you Aristotle. I'm just telling you the Talmud. I'm just telling you the majority of scientific research. But no, man, that's why people don't even like Ben Watkins. That like I said, like I've done the research. Laughter is a mystery. There is no good scientific explanation to laughter, and that's why I use the phenomenon of laughter in my debate with Ben Watkins as a proof for the soul, is that laughter is more easily understood as a product of the soul. That laughter is such a unique, hard to explain phenomenon that it almost is a proof of dualism that is so difficult in a monistic, without a mind-body distinction, to explain the phenomena of laughter. That you could, the Aristotle himself and some of the great minds used the presence of the phenomenon of laughter as a proof for the soul. And so, Ben Watkins was at least, um, honest enough to admit he'd never thought that much about laughter, but he was still able to have a conversation but he didn't falsely assume that there's some like great scientific explanation or understanding of laughter, because actually laughter is known as a mystery of science.
I noticed that you mentioned romantic love was an invention of the blue-eyed man. And are you saying it's like a last 150 years development or like last 500 years development? Like, would it have existed around Shakespeare's time?
Yeah, of the Enlightenment, that historically the idea of a boy and girl meeting each other and then falling in love and having what's known as romance comes in possibly pre-Enlightenment, but in the last 1,000 years in Europe, and it was largely due to the increase of wealth and culture, where you had men and women being educated together, marriage happening at later ages, and where boys and girls would have been playing with each other and able to meet their own partner. So in the ancient world, almost all marriage was arranged, or basically universal, and there wasn't really a venue for this kind. There weren't. I mean, there might have been bars and inns, and prostitution, but a place where you would, like an open market, where you would be able to find a woman and date, and that it really didn't exist until the last few hundred years in Europe, and largely due to increased wealth and the different nature of the structure of society. And I also meant like pastime in terms of laughter, like Krishna playing tricks that only happens in his youth with his mother. Um, but there's also Krishna kind of like joyful tricking Radha, where Krishna tricks Radha. I don't know if that's supposed to be considered funny, but there are pastimes that where Krishna, uh, so to say, tricks the gopis, tricks Radha, and out of some sort of love. I'm not sure if you'd consider that romantic love, and it's not in the sense of a man and woman of their own volition choosing their own mate. So this concept of um, a woman would go in search of a man, or a man would go in search of a woman, and would fall in love, um, is a phenomenon of the modern world for multiple reasons that it didn't exist in the ancient world.
I was pretty. Yeah. I guess I don't want to bring up the thing that I had on my list because it's just degenerate. Let's just go back to the Kurt Jaimungal thing once I'm done this. So it's actually not showing for whatever reason, but I wanted to show how simulation, a lot of times with these theories, it's not whether they're true, it's sort of how they're true. So like solipsism, there's one interpretation that is true, but it doesn't necessarily tell you anything. Same with simulation. It's like stubborn sort of concept that just has salience due to it being, so salient. So anyway, what are we looking at here? Is this concept of zero, like the way we understand zero right now, is a little bit messed up, and we have to correct it at some point, because it's when there's a mistake in your fundamental perception and you have to perceive like a bunch of times, then yeah, that's an issue. It's unclear how to do it, but always helps to go back to a sort of more fundamental version of things. And that's why zero is a concept in the first place. So it's emptiness in some sense. It's also subject to the dependence relation, the trivial dependence relation, which means that it's always stuck in whatever language it emerges in. So how it's true is language dependent first, and then there's all the other things, all these other dependencies that arise. But primarily you have one thing which is not included. disincluded, disallowed, excluded. I've been over this a quadrillion times. It's the quantum state exclusion. What's that mean? Two quantum systems, quote unquote, I call them waveforms, can't be in the same quantum state at the same, quote, moment. We don't want to say time because we want to start, remember that there's a lot of stuff happening pre-time. But yeah, it's impossible to have a triple eight in some sense, a figure eight knot, a simultaneous knot that has three crossings in our world is not possible. And that's the same as saying the Pauli exclusion principle is true and the waveforms are subject to quantum state exclusion, and that the Heisenberg uncertainty principle for a fermion is true, because that principle integral in 3D is just the same exact result. So that's your figure eight knot. And then it has a complement, which is a topological complement. So it's subject to the constraining force of topology, which has somehow managed to correct the Euclidean bias meaningfully and give us the basic 3+1 dimensional torsion field from which you can derive the apple, the mushroom, and even the body. Excuse me. As I've been over about a jillion times. So don't belabor this, but this is sort of where I was going with my preparation for the Kurt thing. I also worked on like what the Trinity actually means. Not this like parody of it. So there's a couple of interpretations you could say are the fundamental meanings of a Trinity, but from a purely materialistic perspective, you're looking at a necessity for parsing causality, decomposing, chunking, however you want to look at it. You need products, reactants, and then the go-between, the currency, so to speak, which was luckily in this universe called photons, and it's the only one. So yay. That's nice. I think that's, oh yeah. I was palling around and looked up that old article about them getting spooked about remember when Facebook AI started communicating in a novel language and it sort of sounded like, I don't know how to put a description on it anyway, but yeah. Do you remember that?
No, I'm not sure what you're saying. Facebook AI novel language.
Yeah, they developed a language and then they shut the AI down because I guess they weren't comfortable, or that was the story, but apparently it was debunked. So I don't know what the actual fact of it is. I just thought it was a very funny, interesting thing that happened. And so I made a little drawing that's quote of the computer. Balls have zero to me, to me. I guess I noted that it had evolved the term ball in its language, and I was wondering if it was using the ball as some sort of storage device. All right, so I'll go over to my other thing. That's all I have for week in review other than my Kurt Mungle prep, which I don't know if you want to go over that now or if you think I should do a separate stream. It's not that long. It's like 6 slides. It's just first pass of the sketch. Is that a yes? Oh, you're still crunching away, eh? Awesome.
Yeah, I got my side bowl, but yeah, go ahead. And I say, like, I mean, to some extent, you need a lot of preparation because you don't know which direction the conversation is going to go. And the main thing you need to prepare is your introduction and the organization of your thought. And then in your own mind to have it organized. So whatever direction he goes, that you'll be able to lay out it in some sort of systematic way of what are the main topics of the areas you want to cover, or how do you divide your theories or systems into categories and subcategories.
Yeah, So I was consulting my Ayurvedic textbook, and I found the 24 cosmological principles, and I figured I could recoup something along those lines. And so the plan is to list the minimum conditions for a unified field model, and then show how, even if you have that, it's still not sufficient from a practical standpoint to comprise a unified field model. So you could have a sort of almost like a unified field proto model, a set of principles that would be, I don't want to say even an exhaustive set, but this 3+1-ness has other modalities that come up with, or that derive other numbers. So anyway, I don't want to get in that too much. It'll be self-evident by the end of it. I've got it down to one primitive, which is localization, which I think people pretty much will relate to, due to space being localized and chairs being localized and tables being localized, and then pretty much anything with a finite boundary being localized. And then in terms of what assumptions need to be made is what I mentioned earlier with the causal trinity, that you need products, mediator, reactants, in order to resolve, or like necessary resolution to sort of encompass everything is what we're after. Conservation of matter, we don't want any holes, metaphysical holes where you could just shove in. Math has 0 = -0, right? So there's always a possibility that that's going to somehow screw up and defeat the purpose of your system, which is to tell true from false statements. So you want to seal out any possible violations of causal closure, which you get from conservation of matter. All right, order sensitive, we justify that with the arrow of time being a thing as well. And then so the conclusion is that it's governed on a basis of permutations, because for those of you who don't know math of this, there's combinations versus permutations, counting principles. Combinations do not take order into account, permutations do. So this is where we're going to eventually link it up to what we're, what we already understand in entropy now. So here are our necessary components of a unified field model, what it would take to be able to describe everything. And given a system, we don't even have to turn the machine on to know what it's going to do, basically. Now, there's obviously a need to do more than just measure a system with a ruler. So what this does is gives you a much faster way to minimize your measurmental interference on a system. And that matters quite a dash, especially when interference creates positive feedback loop. All right, I hope people can read this. What do you think, Doowovid? Is this legible?
Well, the problem is your computer has low bandwidth, so it's only maximum 360 pixels. So even if someone's capable of HD, they can't get HD on the video. So it's readable, but it's not that clear. As it's likely due to your low bandwidth.
Yeah, it's definitely not even a question of likely. It's a definite thing. So I'll just, yeah, so just real quick, like I'm not 100% decided on how I want to structure this proof. I definitely want to make it clear that I think it's going to take more than one unified field model of this form to fully get a grip on things. And yeah, anyway, I'm just, all right, there's one and there's two. Okay, I can I can switch it up now, and maybe this is going to be a bit better. How about that?
I mean, if you want to get like, Gödel completeness theorem. So I mean, Gödel first has his completeness theorem. He has his incoherence theorem, his incompleteness theorem. He also has his completeness theorem. If you're just trying to break things down into logical components, that what are the definitions? What is universal? What could be described and what can't be described? So to say, a theory of everything. Your propositions that certain things are universal, and then if you're saying that there can't be a theory of everything because not everything is universal, or if there's multiple universals and you can't correlate the universals in a codified way that's logically consistent, um, or if you're saying that yes, you can, there will be a theory of everything, and that there is a series of universals that are not mutually contradictory, or could be derived from each other. So I mean, usually the theory of everything is ascribed to the unification of the forces and showing that that there's certain universal characteristics and laws of the universe that describe all material interaction or energy interaction, and then the theory of everything is corresponding, like, so to say, those uh, basic forces. But if you're taking a different approach as opposed to not trying to like unify the various forces, what do you mean by a theory of everything? What's universal? And if there's multiple things that are universal, how are they related to each other?
Well, I'm saying this is a unified physics model, but it's not sufficient to encompass the totality of meaning, and so doesn't warrant being called a unified field model. And I'm perhaps admitting the possibility that an alternate decomposition of physics could exist, but that the burden is on the claimant for that one.
Yeah, and saying if you wanted to start with like arithmetic, like Gödel's completeness theorem, can you unify even a theory of arithmetic? And saying we have arithmetic, but can you formalize an axiomatic non-contradictory system of even something simple as arithmetic, let alone more
Sure.
complicated physical laws that might depend on something like arithmetic?
Well, you could argue that perhaps arithmetic is harder. In some sense, because it's more abstract, but that would be pedantry, wouldn't it? So I won't go there. This theorem, Abel-Ruffini theorem, that we've probably been over like a trillion times by now. Remember it? Quintic solutions, DNE. So in terms of a counting system, you basically, I'll be making the argument that, well, is there really any difference between binary and hexadecimal and all that? Does the base change anything? Do you want to be my hypothetical? Do you think it does? Or does the audience want to weigh in whether the base changes anything? No? Yes?
The base of what?
A numerical base, like binary 0, 1, 2 is 1, 0 in binary, for example.
And you're saying that, like the Abel-Ruffini theorem, saying that there is no algebraic solution to the quintic or higher, that it could be that there is a solution in a different base?
No, I'm saying that the truths of mathematics are base independent.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think so. I mean, I have to see like if they're.
I'm sorry, this is a two-step process. This part doesn't have anything to do with the Abel-Ruffini theorem, if that clears it up. I just realized this is the better thing to say first. Sorry, it's kind of coming out terribly.
Yeah, I think I know that. I mean, but I mean, there's some methods. So sometimes methodically, that's easier to solve something by switching bases. But if something is mathematically true, that would apply to all bases. Oh, I don't know. That's not the Abel-Ruffini theorem, but
It's nothing
if
to do with it. It's two things. So first postulate, we're saying that the truths of mathematics are base independent. Okay, we're gonna hypothetically accept that as a premise. Then we're gonna say, well, by the Abel-Ruffini theorem, there is just no point in going higher than 4. And so then gonna ask, well, what's a number? It's a basic torsion field. I'm not gonna go into why that is right now, but it's not hard to establish. And so if you look at what I just put in the chat there, it's 4 O's in a row. I'll save people the suspense. So if you think about that and how many lines there are 5. Like if you divide it into, you'll find 5 points versus 4 circles. That's accounting principles. So whether there's 4 or 5 in the base is sort of a matter of whether your numbers are points or circles. And that's variable. So what would be nice is if there was an option to change that, but then it's like, nah, let's just get people actually using it first because it seems pretty dang complicated. So yeah, thank you for the support in the chat. I appreciate it very much. So that'll basically be my argument that it makes sense to just stay, and we'll stay base 4 because what we want to do is leave open the possibility for that extra infinity approximation after the 4, which makes total sense because 3 plus 1, that plus 1, the dimensionality of the plus 1 is far larger than the constituency of 3. All right, so that's going to be one of the aspects of the model, pretty much, is this number system. I don't know if it's a full number system, but it's a way to just work with, not have to worry about polynomials, sort of. Not have to worry about the unsolvability of polynomials. What do you think?
Well, I mean, unsolvability. The Abel-Ruffini, it's not that polynomials are unsolvable, it's just that they're not solvable with algebraic equivalence or a polynomial expression.
Yeah, so we establish that as a condition of being a number. And so by that condition, there's not very many numbers, but that's okay because you can recover, the hypothetical granularity of the reals anytime through brute force. Your approximation to the reals is like one of the final steps in computation. It's probably always going to exist somewhere. It's just like, where does it make sense to approximate the reals, aka to approximate space-time as flat? So let's see here. How did I talk about this? I think it was the next one. Oops. Yeah, so the 7th condition is counting principle to establish 1 to 6 from first principles, specifically empirically recoverable pre-measurmental counting principle, that which allows for the integration of 5 and 3D, which is the number of basic waveforms and the number of elements in the periodic table. So it's not a perfect correspondence because we're not dividing in the normal way that we're thinking of. It's more of a spatially integrated division. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say on that. So I'm going to go through that list with Kurt. I'm going to say this is the minimum things that we would need for the model to work. And then I'm going to say that it's not enough to be a unified field model, but that we should embrace it as a principle for generating unified field models. And then just basically say, like, there's already a bunch of models that have been determined already. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. of these, it's basically removing a degree of uncertainty from your domain of observables. Highly error tolerant observables, and that's because they're error centric, but we're not talking about errors in physics sense, we're talking about errors in a deviation sense. Almost like it's hard to put into words exactly because I'm trying to encompass the thermodynamic notion, but then there's also this universal background model notion from Gaussian mixture models and speaker recognition that I don't have those on hand right now. So maybe I'll just put that on the back burner for now and make a note for later. That's my basic idea for the opener, is just to say, here it is in theory, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. And so let's just be happy that we have a method rather than having to be, I don't know, stuck with a single model that's like, one model to rule them all. Bit daunting. So a couple things I had for demonstrations to go through on the show was like,
One model to derive all other models from, or like one framework that all other things could be understood from within. I mean, like I didn't mention, I forgot that you have it in the link. I had this Dr. Bharat Junjawala on my channel, who is trying to unify Hinduism and Judaism, and by saying that these are one of the same personalities. And I think he's really not even really trying to unify. He's more trying to explain Judaism within a Hindu framework, and saying that Judaism is really some sort of perversion in the technical sense, meaning that it was Hindu ideas that were changed and over time and developed into Jewish ideas, but it's some sort of unification, saying that these stories and characters in the Bible are the same characters and stories from the Vedas. And like a multiple truth hypothesis, where you wanted a grand unification of all religions, of all theologies, of all understandings. And so that
I thought that was specifically what we didn't want after all this 144 going on 45 episodes. But please go ahead.
Well, and that's the theoretical, what the theory of everything is. It's a framework, like a axiom that of a series of laws that everything else could be derived from. And so if it was scientific, or if it was like Euclidean in that sense, it would logical, like a Gödel's completeness theorem, it would just be a handful of axioms and then a demonstration that from these axioms, all other things could be derived.
Well, you're saying a quick demonstration, it's like, it's probably not going to be coherent if it's quick. Who's going to understand it? If it's quick is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, even Gödel's incompleteness theorem, even something simple like arithmetic, the mainstream can't be axiomatized. That just the narrow path of Gödel's incompleteness theorem of just applying to arithmetic, that you can't axiomatize arithmetic.
But what about all those claims that we've axiomized arithmetic with set theory and other things? I mean, people have been claiming that since antiquity, haven't they?
Well, no, I'm saying that Euclid just wrote his book in a structure of axioms and derivatives, and the structure from the Greek logic of prepositional logic, that even if it's incomplete and it's not actually accurate, that I mean, to some extent, axiomatic logic is accurate, but if it's incomplete and something basic, like even Euclidean geometry or basic geometry, let's say that Euclidean geometry could be axiomatized, but there's limitations on what Euclidean geometry could explain. but arithmetic is more complicated than geometry to axiomatize. So actually geometry is easier to axiomatize than arithmetic.
Well,
But
I mean, it depends what your conditions are for like. Are we talking about physical geometry? Because what does it mean for geometry to be axiomatized, right? Like I could argue Euclidean geometry is not axiomatized correctly.
yeah, I'm saying it's was structured axiomatically. Say even that's not correctly axiomatized, let alone arithmetic, which appears to be impossible to axiomatise. And so a theory of everything that if you're talking physical laws, and then if you're axiomatizing physical properties uh, in basic physics, like the main forces, gravity, electromagnetism, weak and strong force, um, or like Newtonian laws, that those laws take place in geometric space according to arithmetic. So a theory of everything, to some extent, is more complicated. You have um, your unification of the physical laws, and then the recognition that physical laws happen in geometric space according to arithmetic. So theory of everything is significantly more complicated than like most people just look at it as the unification of the laws of physics, however fail to incorporate that the laws of physics happen in geometric spaces according to arithmetic. So it's the unification of geometry, arithmetic, and physical laws.
Yeah, so can you see what I've got on the screen right now? I realize it
You're,
may not have been a very good explanation earlier, but there's 4 circles and then there's 5 points and we're in the place where the circles are touching.
yeah.
So whether the numerical system goes to 4 or 5 sort of depends how you're orienting numbers. Like it may have to do a little more work to actually get these computables oriented, but essentially this is the template that numbers can be understood as the purple or as the yellow, and that you can use either one, but you have to know which one you're using. Otherwise, your conclusions will be skewed in terms of accuracy due to this perpetual presumptive error that's just happening all the time, that there's anything that's effectively a measurement happening, which is a lot. So that's what we want. Measurement. There's this limiting case, right, where the measurement does affect the system under observation and eventually it decomposes it, but that's like the standard sort of demon problem of observation, that, yeah, you can never fully negate it, but you can maximally negate it, which is to have the most integral, aka error tolerant, aka time independent observables.
Yeah, you could complicate it more with the separation of minds. So let's say you propose a theory of everything that unifies physical laws in geometric space according to arithmetic. You have a separate question of mind. And so you could still take a dualist understanding that the theory of everything in terms of the unification of physical laws in geometric space according to arithmetic is separate than mind and doesn't explain mind. Or if you're going to claim that the theory of everything of physical laws in geometric space according to arithmetic will also explain mind.
Well, I'm excluding mind, self, and consciousness from the materialism because they're primitive.
As the path of Galileo,
primitive enough that I can exclude them from this materialistic model. So under this model, there is no such concept. But what?
That was the Galilean path, that the laws of physics, math, geometry are mind independent. That we have minds, and if you're going to take a dualistic understanding, but space, matter, and arithmetic are mind independent. and a Platonic understanding is, or even a dualistic understanding. Possibly, you could put arithmetic and geometry or some sort of even the unification. So if you're going to table the question of consciousness and mind for your theory of everything, or you claim that your theory of everything also explains mind and consciousness, and then does that mean that mind and consciousness operates according in geometric space according to the laws of arithmetic, uh, and that's how it's unified, or is there something else besides geometric space and arithmetic that is necessary to describe mind?
They're divided out. They're not in this. They're not in this decomposition because this is material physics. So self, mind, and consciousness are divided out. They're considered metaphysical primitives.
So you're still using the theory of everything, even though it really is not even coming to explain everything.
That's the whole idea.
The theory of everything except mind and consciousness.
That's the whole point. God forbid, Doovid, that's my whole point of my proof. It's meant to be like a proof by contradiction, to say like, this is the one that it would be if it could be, but even this one can't be. And that's good, because you don't want to have consciousness clogging up chemistry, do you? I don't.
Well, I think that was the Galilean approach.
Okay, great. How that worked out for him?
Well, we're still using it today. I mean, it worked out for him. He was able to come up with many theories of science that are the precursor to Newtonian movement and the framework we're still using for science today.
I thought it was more Copernicus. I really wish that the people in the chat would stay on topic, honestly. I see someone...
Just let the people in the chat talk with each other, because they might be watching at a different point of the video.
Sure.
Or they might not even be listening to the video. So sometimes you could just let the people in the chat talk with each other about unrelated topics. And that's why it's a chat, that the people following the topic could talk about the topic, and the people are here just to talk to each other. That's fine. They could just use the chat to talk to each other. You don't need to be like a whole monitor on the chat and force people to just talk about the one subject. Like, it's fine. You can just talk to each other and say hi to your friend in the chat, even if it has nothing to do with the topic.
I guess I'd like to keep a certain vibe going, and it's hard to do that when people are doom posting endlessly unrelated subjects. I haven't said anything the whole time, pretty much. I just wanted to remind people that trying to keep it spiritual here. We're mystics. Gosh dang it.
Well, it's okay. Like, I didn't come here for you. I came here to talk to my friend. And so you just say, like, no, either you came here for me or else. And so, so it's like, no, it's fine. You didn't have to come here for me. You could just,
you came here for yourself and continue to uphold the standard for yourself to do what the point of coming here is, which is to...
Well, you didn't come to my house or my party to talk to me or listen to me. You came to my, to the synagogue to meet up and talk to your friend. And so that's relatively normal and, just expected that, like most of the people who come here don't come here for you. They come here just as a meeting ground to talk to their friends.
Okay, back to your original question that I don't think the answer was clear on. Consciousness, I don't know how you'd put this in a model for physics, but anyway, you can just decompose light as consciousness. So you're either expressing it in terms of light and waveforms and amplification reduction, or you're describing it in terms of self and mind and consciousness.
Well, so then it can be unified. Consciousness could be explained in terms of light. Light could be explained in terms of physical laws in geometric space according to arithmetic. So you're saying that the theory of everything can include mind and consciousness, and it'll be able to be explained by physical laws in geometric space using arithmetic.
I did want to get to this question here from Dog Pluto about what if mind and self are inside the whole of everything? Well, what those words means sort of is language dependent. So it's like, well, how do we translate words from ancient languages into English is unclear. There's a whole relational problem as well. So sure, it makes sense to say that there's a mind as well as that you have a self. What those terms actually mean in an objective sense, that's a different question. So we're talking about a cardinality of 3 versus cardinality of what? 4? And it's not just 4, there's a lot more. And they seem to be quite different in the unified physics model. So my point is that if you can't follow the unified physics model, to go to an even subtler level with an even more foundational decomposition that only has 3 elements, you're going to have trouble if you don't really understand the positionals. It's basically stitching everything from nothing, almost. So all that to say that, yeah, there's a corresponding decompositional, but it's not usable because it almost defeats the purpose of the discipline, because physics is sort of like, out of all the disciplines, it's the most, quote, when people say mind independent, I think what they're trying to say is that it's like de-subjectivized. It doesn't have this bias of human ego type thing.
Well, usually they're saying dualism. And so it's when you're saying what if mind and self are inside the whole of everything, if you're trying to use like a more precise language of saying they're in geometric space and subject to arithmetic, and you're just saying in the whole of everything is a way of saying that they're contained within geometric space, as opposed to dualism, that you're saying mind does not exist in geometric space. And the nature of mind, how this other realm, the realm of mind exists, is something that can't be described using arithmetic and geometry. And so where the mind exists, well, it doesn't exist within space, and it doesn't operate according to physical or mathematical laws. And so that's generally the dualistic approach, and it leaves the open end of that maybe there are some recognizable laws that mind operates according to, but it's not contained within geometric space. Obviously, you have the interaction problem then. So, like, well, what is the mind? Where does it exist? And how does it interact with the world? Which could remain unsolvable. And saying I can't answer that question. All I could do is tell you that mind exists, and it exists in a non-material realm, and it does interact.
Well, it's a matter of definition, right? If you want to use my definition, self is the ordering principle and mind is an individuated self. It's still an ordering principle, it's just a different perspective on the same ordering principle.
You were saying it's not a geometric ordering principle.
Versus self as one thing.
Saying it's not a geometric ordering principle.
It does have a geometric component, I suppose. We tend to think of these things as pre-geometric.
You're saying that the spiritual realm or the realm of mind is an ordered realm, but it's not a geometric realm. And there could be parallels to the geometric ordering of the material realm to the ordering of the spiritual realm, but mind does not exist in space.
Oh,
and so
no.
if you're having a theory of everything,
mind would be the thing that could give rise to everything. So you could never say space was a primitive, the way mind can be one.
That still leaves an interaction problem. So you're saying space is a product of mind, and physical laws operate within space according to arithmetic.
No, the mind makes space on a continuing basis.
And the material realm operates according to physical laws within that space.
No, the physical law, the space is basically, you could think of it as one of the laws. I wouldn't, because it's more of a substance than a law, but you could, if you wanted to like really sort of make everything law-like. Trying to find my good diagram here, but not having any luck. of the mushroom with the hyperbolic figure 8. So there's the original shape of it, and then it becomes distorted to fit the shape of an apple. Like, I don't know if you can see that or what.
I don't see anything if you're sharing something.
Well, I'm not sharing it. I just don't know if you maybe remember it, but I've got it on the screen now. Let's see. Oh no, I'm actually I'm on the wrong thing here. I'll go back to internet. And here we go. It's the mushroom apple thing. So you're asking, like, does this things operate on a basis of geometric laws? Well, yeah, there's the geometric law that the hyperbolic figure 8 is excluded, which means the complement is included, which means that it has the potential to manifest anywhere because space, and excuse me, the only reasoning that explains that is that space is brought about by energy, not that energy is brought about by space. So I don't think that's very intuitive, but whatever. To me, it's very geometric and it's just not a function because it has repeating values of the same, it's kind of a trivial thing. It's definitely geometric though. And admits a functional decomposition. So any of that, do you see what I'm talking about here? Or because there's like the shape in the middle doesn't change, but the shapes on either side, they do change. The shapes on either side are changes relative to the one in the middle. Can you see what I'm putting up there?
Yeah, I don't see what that has to do with mind.
The mind contains this template. The hyperbolic figure 8 is the template of the mind. It's sort of a proof that there is a mind. Because it looks a lot like a mind if you think about what a mind is, it seems to fit that definition. Anyway, this isn't going to be resolved today, but I still hadn't got to how I'm going to get into this mind self-consciousness stuff with Kurt, because I was going to say basically it's a completely different thing to go into that stuff. Basically just split it up that way. Dog Pluto asks if mind is a brain. No, mind makes brains. So you can see that the brain would be mind-like. And you can very easily see this. Trying to think of someone just recently did some research where she's able to slow down the current of the cranial or spinal fluid. And it was very interesting. It seemed to have a similar sort of unilateral pumping structure. I guess I'd have to look it up. Okay. I'll make a note of it. So this is, I haven't got to my article that's going to cover this yet, but this is the thing that generates a resonance that then causes motion. And so you could say motion is a property of space, even though it's actually space is a property of motion. But yeah, so anyway, it's extremely counterintuitive, but anyway. The brain is mind-like, but the brain is not a mind, if that helps clear it up. So any brain would have properties in common with the mind, but the mind would have far more properties than just those that related to brains. But you can learn a lot about the mind through the brain, because its purpose is to functionally saturate consciousness. Whoops. And that's also what the universal mind does. So basically I'm I'm not fully out of material yet, but this was pretty much as far as I gotten with my stuff. I basically gotten to the point of saying I want to do like a tentative proof, but then make it a counterproof, and then just go into how you could treat various systems, for example, mind, consciousness, etc. How the system does admit a decomposition, like a trivial decomposition, where I could say like, oh, the periodic table is self, mind, mind, self, well, like blah blah. I could give some, it would basically be Facebook AI tier, potentially, but it's like why? So all about a basis. Think about the basis in linear algebra and what it means to change bases and to what extent that's even possible. And you'll get to understanding how I want to phrase this interview. What do you think so far, Doovid? Think it'll go well with Kurt, or am I walking into the jaws of death?
Yeah, I'm still not sure. I'm saying if
I wasn't planning on talking about this mind stuff necessarily on his show, by the way. I was answering your question when I brought this up, just to be clear.
Well, I mean, it's important in saying that. So, let's say you have a conversation, like I said, you give an introduction, and you say over your areas of research or what the main subjects that you think about, and then you're going to get into your approach to the theory of everything. And so you're not claiming to have a theory of everything. You're claiming to have, even a rejection of the theory of everything can exist, but a template or frame for working at it. And so if your theory of everything is looking at physical laws, geometric space, and arithmetic, and also mind and consciousness, or if your theory of everything is excluding mind and part of your theory of everything is the exclusion of mind and consciousness, and then if you're claiming to you have some sort of monism where that there's
I am a non-dualist. I don't want to inherit the baggage of monism, if there is anything there.
Well, if there is something there, that do you actually have an axiomatic system of monism that you're deriving materialistic laws from a non-material monistic substance? And if you're going to be like Platonic about it, the sphere or something, whatever it is, this monistic substance that gives rise to the material laws, and that could also explain something that say is not material, so to say, like the mind, um, in terms of the theory of everything.
Just comes down to what you mean by a theory of everything. I'm going to basically say that we should be perpetually questing for theories of everything that it makes sense to know everything about. And that this one is a materialistic one. It's fundamentally a materialistic model because it offers a structured interpretation that doesn't include an explicit formulation of self-consciousness or mind, because they're intrinsic in the functional decomposition of the waveform itself as a cycle.
Yeah, so like a scientific paper, like, do you understand the topic well enough to give the framework of the positions of, so to say, the great minds, and how your ideas fit in within the framework of the organization of the current theories that are already out there?
The great minds of the Western tradition, or
Of
my
any
tradition,
tradition.
or what?
Well, I mean, of any tradition where you say over that, here is the way that so and so and understood these issues, and here's how you understand it, and here's how to understand what you're saying in relationship to these other recognizable names, with similar ideas, explanations, what's similar and what's different about what you're saying.
Okay, well, it's hard to say what category I'm in. A material scientist. Mendeleev.
Well, I mean, you just had a series of names and saying, well, what's similar and what's different about what you're saying to what they're saying in order to help someone understand. It's okay that I'm just hearing what you're saying. So to say, let's say the first time, although, I'm an educated person, so I know what a lot of these other great minds say on these issues. So if you frame what you're saying in relationship to uh, other well-known and recognized explanations of the same phenomenon.
A material physics decomposition. You're going back quite a ways to like a long time ago. I don't know how far back it makes sense to go at that point. I mean,
Well, if you're saying like, I don't know that.
I was skipping over it. See, this is the whole thing. I was going to plan the whole interview and leave the intro for last because I figured I'm not getting anywhere with this intro after that disaster last time.
Yeah, but you don't know how the conversation is going to go, so you can't plan the conversation. Anything. So if you know who Kurt Jaimungal is familiar with, and the type names, the type ideas that he's already familiar with, and then you're going to position your ideas within a framework of similarities and dissimilarities of people that he's already familiar with.
I hadn't thought of doing that, but that's a good idea. Would you suggest that?
Yeah, I mean,
like interpolation within a lattice of people who have similar views.
And just so you say, okay, well, I had Jennifer on the program, and as opposed to Sabina Hassenfelder or historical names like Spinoza, Leibniz, or if you want to give Eastern names, Shankaracharya or whoever.
Yes, you have to be like, well, why am I in the lineage of Shankaracharya? And
I'm not saying you're in the lineage of anybody. You're saying that these are well-known names and personalities that he might be familiar with, who had thoughts on these issues.
If I'm correcting Shankaracharya, then I'm in this lineage, am I not, to some extent, or I'm at least in the school next door?
Well, you are, you aren't. But I'm just saying that it's just a good technique or understanding that's similar to the publication of a paper to frame your understanding within the framework. And so here it's not a scientific paper, you're having a conversation with a person. So if Kurt Jaimungal, that he's a scholar, a fan of certain people, that you could consider putting yourself within the framework of these personalities that he's familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
It's either modern personalities that have already been on his show to, say, historical personalities that he mentions frequently. And then so someone asks, Jennifer, what did she say? And, it'd be easier to frame it within that, like similarities and dissimilarities between already known understandings. That she's kind of like, this personality, like Leibniz on this, and like Spinoza on that, or so and so, Shankaracharya on this.
Oh, that sounds so cringe.
Well, it's not. It's just the framework of a scientific paper, and just it's saying that if
Asterisk and Obelix and the guy at the opening of the town who used to make the songs all the time. Well, she's got to dash a doodle of Leibniz and ugh.
Well, I mean, whatever names you're going to use. So I'm saying that just the communication chunking theory, that you're saying that he's already familiar with a lot of these topics, and he's probably familiar with the topics in terms of connection to personalities, so that your understanding to these issues is going to be in comparison to these already known ideas in his head in relationship.
The problem with that is that hypothetically, let's say we do this, and then people go to these people and they're like, what does this mean? And then those people are just like, this is Greek to me, and I've like cited all these people, and I cause all these problems for these people. Like, what about that?
Well, no, I mean, if your scholarship is either going to be good or it's not. So, I mean, if you accurately say, well, this is what this person held as opposed to what I held. And so if you're saying you hold the exact same thing that they hold, at least on this specific issue, and then I mean, it should be a method of clarification, not confusion.
There you go again with the shoulds.
Well, I mean, it'd be your own fault if it's not.
How long does it take people to understand a theory of physics? I mean, is it ever really finished being understood?
Well, no, but it's like people have, presumably you have an educated audience that knows a lot of information, and for you to establish your own ideas within the framework of stuff that they already know, and to say what I'm saying is very similar to these things that you already know and are familiar with, and it's dissimilar to what you know and are familiar with in these ways. So that's just probably the clearest way for clarification and communication, for you to say over your theory, and that you're going to be able to describe to the audience your theory into relation what a lot of them, being educated people who've thought about the topic, already know. And you do that through similarity and dissimilarity.
All right. So should I be citing people in physics or philosophy?
Well, and probably both.
And then it's like, where does it end?
Well, it's endless. I'm saying just like proper preparation prevents poor performance. So, if you did this regularly, you would have hundreds of names. I mean, thousands of names, that people could list thousands of names, and you would be able to say similarities and dissimilarities between what you're saying and thousands of other people.
So you want me to cite the guy with the spirally periodic table? Would he make sense to cite, or would just his work make sense to cite? Like, cause that's where I'm all confused on the thing, because I didn't.
There's a difference in
everything.
No, I mean, when you're speaking on theories of everything with Kurt Mungle, you should cite people that.
It's like, who did I get the information from? Heisenberg.
No, I'm saying you're not publishing a paper. So if you're publishing a paper, you have to do your due diligence and cite anybody historically that has relevant thought on the topic, which might include, people that most people never heard of, but are relevant because they have advanced the topic in a similar way to you're advancing it previously. So it's the due diligence. But Kurt Mungle, if you're speaking to a large audience, you're not doing the due diligence of citing any name of a person. You're trying to put yourself to cite people that are well familiar and understood. So if you say like Einstein, people that are well known, where Kirk and a large part of the audience are going to be familiar with. So it's not the same as writing a paper in the due diligence of citing anybody who had done relevant research related to the topic at hand. The purpose is to facilitate smooth communication. So you want to cite names that are well known and to the majority of the people listening. So something like Einstein, Leibniz, Descartes, Plato, Aristotle, something, Sabina Hasenfelder, people that have been on his show, something that the majority of the audience is going to have like a chunk in immediate recognition. So when you say, I think about this topic like this, and it's similar to the way that this person who you're all familiar with thought about it, and dissimilar in this way, you're enhancing the audience's understanding, as opposed to.
Or am I being deceptive and saying, well, here, this is a lot like my theory, when really it's not, and that's kind of unfair to the originators of these other theories?
Well, I'm saying if you've done your homework, you'll be able to say the similarities and dissimilarities.
So because
So-
I had some thoughts on physics, I now have to research everybody who's had ancillary thoughts to this domain when it's essentially boiling down to philosophy of mind and the hard problem of consciousness.
Well, I mean, if it's your first time doing this, so you're not going to know offhand.
My
like,
first
if you-
time making a unified field model, or my first time jumping through infinity hoops on the
your
way
first time talking to a crowd of educated people, that they're going to.
No, I've many times talked to a crowd of educated people, not in this domain, but definitely.
We're saying in this domain, that so when you mention the idea, they're going to cipher it through the ideas that are already in their head, and that will usually be, within the realm of known theories and personalities. And so if you've done it a few times, you say like, oh, like, like Einstein or Bohr or these common names that people are going to cipher the information through. So if it's your first time doing it, you may not be able to prepare for it. You may have a difficult time doing it. But I was saying, if you'd given public presentations many times and you had like a Q&A afterwards, you would have some handle on the type way that people cipher the information and the type questions they ask or relate. Is that kind of like what this guy says? And you'd be like, well, yes or no, it's like in this way, it's dislike in that way. And it's different than publishing a paper where you're talking about the due diligence and the history and what you're saying that's unique and pushing forward in the implication. So like the public presentation is different, and the purpose is the value proposition, and that people are going to walk away and understand what you said. And they're going to have to cipher if you're giving new information, you're saying something that they haven't heard before. It's not necessarily like everything that you're saying is something that they haven't heard before. And a lot of the ideas that you're saying are going to be very similar to ideas that they currently know and understand. And so your ability to communicate that will be in relation to what people already understand, and the better that you could articulate and express uh, how your idea fit into relationship with what people in your audience are already familiar with, will be to the benefit of you and your presentation and to the educational experience of the people watching.
There's an issue with conveying the notion that I got my ideas from these people on some level.
I didn't even say that. I don't know why you're jumping to that.
I'm not saying that you are saying that. I'm saying it's a possible perception that to me needs to be taken under consideration, nothing more.
Yeah, but so if you haven't done this before and you haven't had a Q&A that
I've had several hostile Q&As. I've had some friendly Q&As, and as I said, in other topics, which were delightful. Won't go into that now.
Yeah, so you're talking about putting forward your own thoughts, and then you're hypothetical, what Kurt Jaimunkel is going to ask you, and probably what he's going to ask you is going to be definitely what he asked you is going to be in relationship to what he already knows. And obviously, like theories of everything, he's been doing a show, he has advanced education, he spoke to a lot of people, he knows a lot of stuff, so he's going to cipher your ideas in relationship to other ideas that he already knows.
Okay.
And it should just be obvious. I mean, it's not even something for you to be emotional or confrontational about it. It's just obvious. It's the way the conversation is going to go. When you say something, he's going to say, "Is that like this that this person said?" And that's just how conversation works.
So I shouldn't be like, "Shut the fuck up, Kurt," when he says that. Just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, saying, God forbid, that's what you sound like. And he would say, well, was that, Einstein says this, and he was like, blah, 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 I hate Einstein. He was like, no, I mean, just that's how people act and react, are going to react to your ideas. And if you understand, and that's how he's going to express his understanding or misunderstanding of what you're saying, is in comparison to ideas that he already understands. As I said, like, avoid the bad character, and you just be able to talk about your ideas. And it doesn't have anything to do with your endorsement or lack of endorsement of other people. You're just talking about ideas, and people are going to understand your ideas in relationship to ideas that they already know, and the ideas that they already know is in relationship to the personalities of the people who that they heard or understand these ideas through.
All right.
And it's not your endorsement of these other people or not. I think it's an expression of the idea, and so if you're saying that what you're saying is similar to what this person said in this way or dissimilar in this way. So if you say a certain aspect of your idea, and then the other Kirk brings up, is that like this person who said that, and you're like, yes, it is like this person who said that in this way, and it's not like this person who said that in that way. And you don't need to give your opinion on like the other person or endorse or not endorse them. You're talking about your ideas, and you're saying that my idea is similar to what this person said in this way and dissimilar in that way. And that's how communication works.
Our friend asks, so what if they do think it's derived as long as they arrive at the final conclusion? Because it's unrealistic for people.
You don't have a final conclusion.
We're trying to facilitate learning here. So the key is what will do that. Nothing else matters compared to that.
Yeah, that's why I keep on mentioning like that people understand ideas, new ideas in relationship to old ideas that they already understand. And so there's a certain likelihood of common ideas that people are likely to already understand. And so if you're saying these common ideas that people already understand, you think are incorrect or are in conflict with what you're trying to teach them, then you should be able to describe how your idea is similar and dissimilar to these ideas that they already currently understand.
And what ideas do people understand versus have the impression of understanding?
It was an educated crowd. It's like Newtonian physics, maybe Einsteinian physics, maybe um, certain theorems or curriculum that certain level. Like if you had taken this within the canon of education, like if they've taken this classwork, if they've read these books, would be the typical framework to discuss it in, like so in this book or this author or in the canon, like if you took this class or this level of education material, or you could put in actual well accepted known theorems, like according to Newtonian mechanics or according to Einstein's
Doesn't it make
relativity.
more sense to just say, hey, we've got a periodic table and maybe we need to take another look at it and just sort of reinterpret it and see how we can use it to make predictions? Maybe.
Well, if you're saying that really you're like, okay, that maybe the people you're talking to are more educated than you and more knowledgeable than you, but you're saying you have something new, so all of the knowledge that they currently have, forget about that. I mean, that's not how
No,
things
of
work.
course not. I think that anybody who has practiced any type of focus, contemplation, concentration, even just curiosity, that's practice. If you don't understand what it is, and you don't even know what constitutes practice for it necessarily. I just want to say, like, this doesn't mean we have to deny our current understanding of anything. This doesn't really do that. It's just an additional way of analyzing in a higher resolution of dimension. Good question in the chat here. How am I going to explain my thing without explaining my thing? Well, one of the ways of doing that was to just leave the consciousness and the mind out of it. And if people were like, oh, well, the thing on the left looks like a mind, and that's like, all right, ooh, mysterious, whatever. Just present the physical model. Then say, well, there's this trinity of this perspectival trinity that you can introduce that sort of satisfies these criteria and gives you a basis to think about these more traditional impersonal mind concepts. But like, other than just like, I don't want to sarcastically cite Mendeleev and Heisenberg. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's like it's almost like I need a number, you know. If I can only cite 20 people, then I'll find 20. If it's 50, it'll be 50. But I could keep going to hundreds of people. Which is why I feel like citing anybody is almost a mistake.
Well, I mean, you do by trial and error. So, like I said, like if you just started appearing on shows and talking about it and seeing the type, Q&A sessions, what people ask, and through trial and error. And if you're only trial and error is a week in review, and I'm the only one you talk to, or the chat, I mean, at least it's something. But you might be in for a shock when you appear, on the Kirk Jaimungal, and the reaction you get. But because largely you figure these things out by trial and error and experience. And crowds are humbling, and so just the handful of people that watch this, in front of hundreds of people, or a larger crowd, it could be much more. Your personality is much more magnified. Like Luke Ford says, your faults are much more magnified, and but you get better through trial and error and experience.
Did you have any ideas about putting forward a proof like that without mentioning consciousness at first? I think that's a good strategy.
I mean, I wouldn't put it in forms. I don't have a proof like to format it like that. Even like multiple truth hypothesis, more of like a framework than a proof. So if you're coming at a theory of everything from a proof angle, that's a high bar of.
It's basically like with free will. It's like, let's assume free will exists and then find how it leads to a quote contradiction, which isn't not a contradiction, it's an inconsistency, but that aside. Similar idea as that.
Well, if that's all you're doing, you're saying like that
would be the first leg of it. I think that would probably take an hour unless we get bogged down in questions. So with Kurt, frankly, I don't know. It could be 3 hours because he might not, he might latch on to something he doesn't feel he understands and he needs me to go into, and I'm fine to do that. But then it does sort of become challenging. Oh, well, I'm sure he won't mind carrying out the interview over several days if necessary.
Well, I mean, even if you're just, you're repeating the Gödel's incompleteness theorem. You're saying like, let's assume that there's a theory of everything and then show contradiction to why you can't have a theory of everything.
It's more along the lines of, here's what maybe we think a theory of everything ought to look like. And then even if we had that, which we do because of my thing, it's not really a theory of everything in the sense we would think of it as being a magic key. It's like, okay, now that I get this, I can do anything. It's there is a level on which that's true, but the tech is like,
so here's my theory of everything, but you actually can't do anything with it.
No, the theory of anything
diagram, it explains everything,
subtle,
and like no more questions. And what can you do with it? Nothing, absolutely nothing.
Yes, nothing and everything.
What use is your theory of everything? Like nothing.
Well, that's a different thing entirely. And there's one example which talked about with Jason, and it's going to be about the microstates and the chemistry thing, which I'm still thinking about, but I want to get the Kurt Jaimungal thing 100% good because my current ability to look good is not high. I want to heighten it.
Well, so you need practice, and saying like if you don't even have a date for your Kirk Jaimungal, but I mean you're talking to memes, but I mean, you try streaming on your own channel, but yeah, I mean, you practice, and I guess if your first thing is on Kirk Jai Mungle and it's a disaster, it'll be a disaster. Like it's not like they're going to shut down your
It's not
YouTube
going to be a
channel.
disaster, okay? It's just a
If
question
it,
of how good it goes.
yeah, I'm saying if it goes good, people will be interested. People sub to your channel, you'll get invites to talk about it more. If it's a disaster, it'll just be like T Jump. You'll have a bunch of people making fun of you in the comments and chat, and almost no one's going to sub to your channel, and you're not going to get any invites from it. I mean, even the worst case scenario, like if it's a complete flop, uh, isn't that bad. I mean, you should probably still go forward with it, but even if it's a complete flop, it's not it's not like it's unlikely to have negative consequences. Just be a flop.
I feel the possibility of a flop is quite low. It's just a question of how much of a success is it going to be. And so I'm thinking leading with this counterproof and saying, this is what it would be, but it isn't. And then moving forward and saying that it's counting principle. There is a counting principle contained within it that you can recover in different orders in different scales, I guess, as also being true. And I could do the example with consciousness, but yeah, I guess that would be about it. Or I suppose I could go into my model of subjective consciousness as well. Should probably talk about that too, unless he just wants to have me on for some sort of, I don't want to say flame wars thing, but like I noticed he had Sabine Hassenfelder and Bernardo Kastrup on, like debating a little bit. He might want to have me on for something like that. So even if that's the case, I want to have a video already on the channel of giving the presentation that I would have given on Kurds if I had the opportunity to go on and actually present it. So yeah, we'll see. I'm surprised you really enjoyed going on Ralph's there. God. Think you're going to keep doing that?
Probably not. I mean, it's like, I mean, I'm not sure. Like, if he does like talk about chess or something, but yeah, once he has all those people on there, it's kind of an anti-intellectual stream, or so I didn't really feel like I gained anything from it, or there was much of a discourse of ideas. I mean, he was just talking about chess a little bit. And I'll see if that and it's also like I don't get like any positive feedback from doing that. So God forbid, but like I might probably limit it, like because it's like it just mostly argumentative and unproductive conversations. God forbid.
Yeah, you were on there for quite a while.
Well, I mean, started with just talking chess like the first few hours, and then once that was over, it just got into random subjects and was argumentative. And so, like even at the beginning, I wanted to bow out. Like that guy Mossad came on, and like I felt I should have just got off the stream then. But then I ended up sticking around, and it was just a dumpster fire and just going in circles and circles about the laughter, because I thought I explained myself relatively clearly, and they're just argumentative, and then didn't even start making sense. It was just who knows? I mean, just like argument at a bar or something, people yelling at each other.
Huh. All right.
I mean, even Charles is like that. You're just repetitive, where it's just like a chance for him to give a stump speech on his like pre-recorded opinions. So like anything you mention is just like a trigger for him to go into like the repetitive lecture, and then like I find myself doing that, and it's just unproductive because like people that wanted to take you serious, they would have heard you, or they could have looked up your material, and then so it's unclear what you're just dumpster fire where it's just bad character, bad personalities, trying to dominate each other, and nothing good comes to it from any perspective. So, I mean, conversation is generally like that in general. Like silence and research is better, and then when you start to have conversation with the regular debaters or something like that in an unorganized way, it's almost always negative, and then playing to the crowd. And I mean, maybe to the audience, like it seemed like his chat was somewhat agreeing with me on my points of laughter, um, and just like arguing the same things or new people, and the pain of like no one understanding what I'm talking about, and then like in tuning motives and turning into personal attacks, and I mean that's just general how most streams are. In fact, almost all streams are like that. So even like on Charles Moskowitz, like you just give some research, say over some interesting things, how to understand issues, and then has to get into like in suppositions about intention, and good guys and bad guys, and nonsensical, like trying to win people over to one side or the other, and thinking like like someone won or lost, or win over to who you're trying to portray as the good guy and the bad guy. So that's most streaming. Most streaming is counterproductive, and even the stuff on chess in the beginning, like maybe the stuff on chess was decent content at the beginning. So if IC3 or like another chess player came, but like right after he just brought his regular crew on, and it just immediately degenerated into like the kind of normal, um, just arguing, yelling at each other that most of his shows are, and it didn't even have a stay on topic, and basically everyone, it was all of a sudden personal. Like everybody that came on was like all of a sudden it was personal, and so no one learned anything. No ideas were really understood. So I don't mean Kurt Mungo's not like that. He's got a topical intellectual show, so hopefully it'll be good content, and you will find you find the audience to advance ideas. People are serious about ideas, but that's less popular because I mean people want drama, and probably most people tune in for that. Like they want to see the drama. That's what gets them interested in, and so yeah, I'm generally trying to avoid that type of content because it's just a drain, and there's real no benefit for that besides getting your name in front of a crowd. And even though there's some impulse to do that, ego, it's almost completely negative.
Yeah. He is, interested in particular in the model's application to the domain of stellar precipitation. So probably due to my rather obvious prediction that stars would occur near maximum density regions. Later validated. Pretty long time ago. So he may just want to go into that. So I'm sort of assuming he's going to let me guide the conversation. He seems like quite a mutable character, given his content that I've seen to date, which admittedly is not much. Sorry, I was back thinking about Kurt Mungle, not Ralph.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
I don't know. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, even like if it's interview based, it's about a facilitation of understanding with the other person. So even like, who's Kurt Mungle? What does he stand for? Like, I don't even know. or it's like Lex Friedman or something. Like I don't tune in for Lex Friedman, I tune in for the guests, and so just providing good interviews, and they're good interviews because it's not about him; it's about the guest.
It almost seems like he lets the guest have as much control as they want. So it sort of shows something about the guest, the manner in which the interview proceeds.
And saying, he already gets big names, so saying that that like if someone tunes in for you, it's kind of his domain to bring in smaller names that people don't know about. So if you get a big name in the field that people are interested to, like I tuned into him because I wanted to hear his guest that I'd known, I'd read their papers and seen some of their work and wanted to understand better. And so if that's not the case, where there's not a big crowd of people that have heard of you, that have read your papers and want to understand more, it's going to be more like his um, discretionary power of being a host to bring in names that he finds interesting. And so from that you'll have an opportunity to express yourself to an audience that already is taking these ideas seriously. And so that his show is probably one of the best opportunities for you. And even it's kind of like Adam Green for me, even though Adam Green's a hostile environment, it's an environment where people think about the issues that I'm thinking about or promoting, even if it's from a different perspective. But so it could even be like that. But like no, I mean, he's using his discretionary power to promote some newer personalities, and if he uses that to do that for you, you should take the chance, and hopefully that will be um, positive, where you could have people have an open mind to your ideas and the ability for a few hours to try to explain your ideas to a larger audience in front of a educated, competent base that has quite a bit of knowledge on the topics.
And Kurt does have a degree in physics and math, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if he has any of his own theories, I said, but yeah, I mean, he's a competent basis to understand what the people are talking about, who actually are advancing. So whether he has made advancements in this field or he's just educated enough to be competent in the field, enough to interview and understand the topics to let the other high level researchers explain that.
Well, it would really depend on the domain. So, yeah, since it's a unifying model, there's possibly going to be some domain crunching of sorts. But it's just a physical model. So it's a physical model that has an associated process that could hypothetically generate other models. How's that? And neither of those is my own opinion. They're both things that are synthetically derived from my own knowledge base. So I'm sort of back to thinking that the citation is a mistake. I mean, if it's obvious that there's someone whose work is similar to my own, I mean, whose is unclear. I haven't thought about other people's work in that sense. So.
Well, I mean, if you present it a few times, your audience will tell you because they'll process and try to decipher your ideas through what they already understand.
Okay, then that hasn't happened. Why hasn't that happened yet then?
Maybe because no one who actually understands your ideas watches you. You haven't been put in front of an environment that takes your work seriously or understands it to try to like and saying even memes is somewhat like that. He's always mentioning other, like I think he mentions in relationship to other ideas, but that's just the way things work. Like people are going to mention names and other ideas. When you say something, it's going to trigger some pattern in their head, and that's usually going to be in relation to like another name and another idea.
You want me to? I'm sorry. If no one else can think of someone and I can't think of someone, what are we supposed to do? There's no one. And if there is someone, then they can come forward. If someone thinks there's someone, then let us know. We're always there to take those things on board. Frankly, I'm more concerned about my introduction, but I don't even think it's worth going into because that didn't go anywhere and I haven't even thought about it. I was just focused on that proof thing. So
for me, you haven't even scheduled a date. Like, I mean, who knows? Last year you said it was going to happen last year, so like, who knows whether you're even going to be on this show? But saying when you actually have a date scheduled or something, maybe have some time pressure to be more proactive about it. But I mean, at least if you're preparing now for something that may not even happen, some of the preparation is good in and of itself. But once it's scheduled or booked or you have a date, then you'll have even more incentive or deadline.
I don't think I'm going to book it until I've finished it, frankly.
You're saying you booking it or him booking it? You're saying he already agreed to it, and once you say it, you'll set a date, and it's you're the holdup, not him.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but probably.
Saying it's still possible that like you'll tell him like, oh, Kirk, I'm ready, and he'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, Jennifer, I'm not going to be able to have you on.
There's less of a chance of that happening. I mean, that could happen, sure, but there's less of a chance of it happening if I already have a pre-video made on my channel that I can send him where he can watch it at his leisure, and if he has questions, he can ask them. And I can just
I've been telling you that since we started, that's what you should do.
Well, now I'm doing it.
Okay, well, good
for you. Time, but I'm working on it now, okay? These things take time.
The humbling nature of failure.
You can't rush the creative process.
Well, I'm saying failure is humbling.
Yep.
Okay, so maybe I'm going to wrap up unless you have anything else. And if you want to keep on going, feel free. I'll try to catch it early this week, at least in 2-speed.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know if the audience still has questions or if they're tuckered out and still want to talk about things. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I mean, thanks for participating, Doowovid. It was great to catch up, and I look forward to the next one.
Okay, yeah, great.
All right, well, so the context on this is like, yeah. Okay. This is the article that is in question. So it's sort of pre-selected as the thing that he thought that was good in my stuff. And I'll put it up again. John Willis says, analysis paralysis. Do your prep. Stop fretting. Have your vid presentation. Light it up. Okay. Thanks, Dawn. Thanks for nothing. Have you ever heard of don't write a sonnet in a language you don't understand before? Just a thought. It would appear to be, I don't know, a consideration.
I've done 5 here. Next, at a 45-degree angle to the x-axis, we're going to introduce the first exclusion event. So that means mass is going from the very center to just adjacent the center. It's got a particular velocity at that point, as well as an associated mass. That velocity on its own is linear, but because it's in the gravity field of the object that excluded it, it doesn't look like a line when we go to observe it. Continue that path on the shape of the circle for another 90 degrees. And we're going to map the next exclusion event there. We're going to continue this throughout the 5 layers that we've drawn. At every 90 degrees, we introduce another exclusion event. Next, we're going to come to the more complex portion, the most difficult portion of the drawing here, and that's to get the pure form archetype just right. It has to connect all the points on the path of your excluded object, and so you're trying to get it as smooth as possible, always going through all of those points. So that takes a bit of practice. It's important to appreciate that this is the most technically challenging portion. So to perceive the entire shape as one entity is going to get you the smoothest rendering. And the next path that we're going to draw is the real path, which actually includes the quantum state exclusions. That's a lot easier because it's always going along a circular path. So when we go to observe this, this is actually the path we would expect to see, where there's those finite, discrete, exclusionary bands. The circles are just a backdrop to help bring out the image of the contrasting pure form and actual paths.
All right, so that's that. And there's a huge wall of definitions for this one. Loose the background music. Seriously, says Daryl. Thanks, Daryl. Thanks for the feedback, buddy. Is this electron shells? No, it's not. It's not electron shells. It governs electron shells, but this is the phenomenon of stellar creation. Here we go. All right. I'm not sure how well these diagrams are going to come through. Oh, it doesn't look too bad. Okay, I'm not saying I'm going to keep an introduction song in the Kurt Guy Mungle thing. That was just to take a little break there. Lighten up, Daryl. But yeah, if there's no actual questions in the chat, I will be wrapping this up soon, but I just wanted to go over real quick what has so far been of interest. Okay, so Dog Pluto says, I never heard of exclusion events. Okay, so if you want to start somewhere, you want to look at the Pauli exclusion principle. And that's your basic, you can't have two fermions in the same quantum state at the same moment or instant, or not time, because time is sort of part of the space-time event. It's a bit complicated. But basically, there's a limit to how dense matter can get. And that is demonstrated by something called the Pauli exclusion principle. And I'm saying in my own theory, don't ask anybody else to explain this, because I don't know what the hell you're talking about. My own theory, Heisenberg, in triplicate, basically, like an entangled triplicate of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is the same as the Pauli exclusion principle. That's an additional sort of assertion that I'm making. It's not the Pauli exclusion event, it's the, here, now I'm just about to share it here. It's the Pauli exclusion principle. So we're sort of looking at a definitional thing here. That's your easiest argument underlying this is just that for matter, there's a maximum density. And what that maximum density is will depend on a bunch of things. This, for the same reason that sometimes it's raining and sometimes it's sunny. What's happening depends on several co-arising variables. So the exclusion event references the Pauli exclusion principle on a large scale. And we're only going to see these kind of large scale exclusion events. They can really only exist in certain circumstances. So if there were electrical differentials, then they would override this. So this can only really happen in regions where there's nothing else going on other than gravity. I'll pull up that other article I was thinking of. Science Alert. So reliable. I just have to keep going back like on a pretty frequent basis. Alrighty. Here we go. So this was in 2017. Black hole burst, stars forming. This just wasn't really in the model. It's this whole accretion thing and stellar transitions, etc., really just sort of being a decomposition of the various phases of stars, if you will. So that's how we kind of understand cosmology now. It's like, well, there's stars that are in this range of qualities, and then there's this range of qualities, and we don't really have a unifying principle as to how, well, sort of faced with that same problem as like forever is why is there something rather than nothing? It's not really maybe something that, maybe not a question we can answer in any absolute sense, and maybe we can't answer any question in an absolute sense. Okay. So some traditional ideas. The first one, I suppose you could say, that operates right now would be some type of a primordial cause, which then invokes the domino chain causality type thing. And so there was an initial impetus, and everything since then has just been positive and negative feedback loops of that initial impetus. So there are issues with that. It's forced. There's like no preferred beginning from a universal perspective. From a relative perspective, well, of course, it makes sense to set the beginning as when the planet and the star, the orbit started existing. So that's what my model does, is say, well, where do we look to find where we would expect the next star to exist? Okay, so anyway, first model is your primordial cause, okay, whatever, first cause, and then everything goes out from there, and okay. Is that workable? Well, sort of hard to say. I'd say the burden's on the claimant, but in terms of what a model ought to do versus what it can do versus other things, intelligibility kind of goes a long way. And I place subjective level intelligibility as a very high value indeed. So then you have your sort of two versions of, I guess, what you could call a fundamentally, I don't want to say nihilistic view, but of building properties up from fundamentally empty quote unquote sets, but that have a physical presence. So the something that exists is pervaded by the pressure of nothingness to such an extent that an effective buoyancy is created, which enables motion. Now again, reminder, what are we looking for? Why is there something rather than nothing? AKA, why is there motion rather than stillness in a universe that doesn't have anything coming into it in any obvious way, such as to power it? So that's bouncing off the bottom. I call that tactical nihilism. I don't know if that's any good. The other one would be a type of fundamental nihilism, which is nothing exists. Something is a mirage constructed of resonant harmonics of nothingness, which enables motion in a manner similar to a bubble trapped in a box filled with liquid. So those are your different aesthetics that you can go with for a model. And in terms of which one of these that I use, I would say none of them. Not to be a ask like troll, but yeah. It's a simplified version of my understanding that may or may not bear much resemblance to my own understanding on a fundamental level. All right, so this is the article. I am going to, I suppose, make a presentation on it and hopefully make it really clear as to why it's a unified cosmological model. Pretty long indeed. Well, I want to thank everyone for tuning in all this time. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to the next one. We'll see you all next Sunday, if not soon.